Part 1. The second death. My name is Detective Victoria Kane, and I've been investigating unusual deaths for the Metropolitan Police for 9 years. I thought I'd seen everything: murders disguised as accidents, suicides that were actually homicides, deaths that defied medical explanation. But nothing prepared me for the case that started when Margaret Sullivan died, was buried, and then showed up at her own funeral 3 days later. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Detective Kane, we have a situation at Riverside Cemetery. A woman who was buried on Saturday has been found walking near her grave. When I arrived, paramedics were treating an elderly woman wrapped in a blanket. Her clothes were dirty, her expression blank, but she was definitely alive. And according to the groundskeeper who'd found her, she was definitely Margaret Sullivan, the same woman whose funeral service he'd attended 3 days prior. Mrs. Sullivan, I approached carefully. Can you hear me? Do you know where you are? She turned her head toward me slowly, her movements mechanical. Her eyes were vacant, showing no recognition or emotion. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came, just a soft exhalation, like she'd forgotten how to form language. The paramedics confirmed her identity through fingerprints and a distinctive scar on her left hand. This was Margaret Sullivan, 72 years old, who had died of heart failure on Friday and been buried on Saturday. Yet here she was, alive and moving, 3 days after being pronounced dead and laid to rest. How is this possible? I asked Dr. Richard Chen, the medical examiner who'd signed her original death certificate. You pronounced her dead. You examined her body. She was dead, he insisted, reviewing his notes from Friday. No pulse, no respiration, no brain activity. I performed a thorough examination. Margaret Sullivan died of cardiac arrest at 3:47 p.m. on Friday. I'd stake my career on it. Then explain how she's walking around right now. I can't. This violates every principle of medicine and biology I know. Unless, he hesitated, unless she wasn't as dead as we thought. Suspended animation, extreme coma state, something that mimicked death so perfectly that our instruments couldn't detect life. But even then, 3 days without oxygen, without circulation, her brain should be irreversibly damaged. We brought Margaret Sullivan to the hospital for comprehensive examination. The results were disturbing. She was alive by every conventional measure: heartbeat, breathing, brain activity, but something was fundamentally wrong. Her body temperature was several degrees lower than normal. Her responses to stimuli were delayed and mechanical. And most unsettling, she showed no recognition of family members, no memory of her life, no personality or individual awareness. It's like someone is operating her body remotely, one neurologist observed. The biological functions are working, but there's no one home. No consciousness, no self-awareness, just automated responses to basic stimuli. Margaret's daughter, Sarah, was devastated. That's not my mother. I can see her face, hear her breathing, but she's not there. It's like something is wearing her body, like a suit. Over the next week, Margaret's condition didn't improve. She moved when prompted, ate when food was offered, but showed no initiative or awareness. She never spoke, never showed emotion, never indicated she recognized anything about her former life. Then, exactly 7 days after she'd been found at the cemetery, Margaret Sullivan died again. This time in a hospital bed, with doctors monitoring every system. At 3:47 p.m., the exact same time as her first death, her heart stopped. Her breathing ceased. Her brain activity flatlined. And this time, she stayed dead. Dr. Chen performed the autopsy with me observing. There's no physical cause of death, he reported. Her heart is healthy. Her organs show no disease or damage. It's as if her body simply decided to stop functioning at a predetermined time. 7 days, I said. She was given exactly 7 days after returning. Why 7 days? What was the purpose? That's when I discovered Margaret Sullivan wasn't the first. Searching through recent records, I found 4 other cases in the past 6 months that matched the pattern. People who died, been pronounced dead by qualified medical examiners, been buried or cremated, only to reappear days later. All of them showed the same blank, emotionless state. All of them died again exactly 7 days after their return, all at the exact same time of day as their original death. Robert Martinez, age 45, had died in a car accident, been declared dead at the scene, transported to the morgue. 3 days later, he'd walked out of the morgue refrigerator, blank and silent. 7 days after that, he dropped dead in his hospital room. Emily Chen, age 34, had died from a drug overdose in her apartment. Her body had been found 2 days after death, positively identified by family. She'd been cremated. Yet 4 days after the cremation, she'd appeared at her sister's house, alive but empty. 7 days later, dead again. The pattern was consistent and impossible. People weren't just dying and coming back wrong. They were being dead. Definitively and completely dead. And then something was reanimating their bodies for exactly 7 days. Before allowing them to die permanently, I assembled a task force: Dr. Chen, neurologist Dr. Patricia Reeves, and 2 other detectives. We need to find the connection, I told them. These people aren't randomly selected. Something links them. Something that determines who gets reanimated and why. Dr. Reeves had a theory. What if they're not being reanimated? What if something is temporarily inhabiting their bodies, using them for a specific purpose before discarding them? Inhabited by what? Are you suggesting possession? Supernatural entities? I'm suggesting we don't know what's possible at the boundaries of life and death. These bodies are functioning without consciousness, without personality. Something is operating them, using them to do something. We need to figure out what that something is. We reviewed surveillance footage from the week each victim had been alive again. The patterns were disturbing. They all performed specific actions, visiting certain locations, meeting certain people, handling objects or documents. Margaret Sullivan had gone to her bank and withdrawn money from a safety deposit box. Robert Martinez had visited his office and accessed his computer files. Emily Chen had retrieved something from a storage unit. They're completing unfinished business, I realized. Whatever is controlling them is using that 7-day window to finish tasks. The original person left incomplete when they died. But who or what would have that kind of power? Dr. Chen asked. And why wait until after death to complete these tasks? Another detective added. I dove into the backgrounds of all 5 victims, looking for connections. Different ages, different occupations, different causes of death. But then I found a single common thread that tied them all together. In the 24 hours before their first deaths, all 5 had received a phone call from the same number. The number was disconnected now, but phone records showed that Margaret Sullivan had spoken to it for 3 minutes the day before she died. Robert Martinez had received a call from it 6 hours before his fatal car accident. Emily Chen had called it herself, twice, in the hours before her overdose. I tried calling the number. Disconnected. I traced its origin: a burner phone, purchased with cash, no registered owner. But the call logs showed something chilling. This number had called over 200 people in the past year. And of those 200, 47 had died shortly after the call. This isn't random reanimation, I told my team. This is systematic. Someone or something is calling people who are about to die. And those calls are creating a connection that allows reanimation after death. We're dealing with a predator that's using death itself as a weapon or tool. Dr. Reeves looked at the data, her face pale. Victoria, there's something else. Look at the timing of the calls. They're not happening before death, they're happening at the exact moment of death. Down to the second. As if whoever is making these calls knows precisely when each person will die. Then we're not dealing with a person. We're dealing with something that can predict or cause death, and then exploit that death to reanimate the body for its own purposes. What purpose? Dr. Chen asked. What is it trying to accomplish by making dead people walk around for 7 days? That was the question that kept me awake at night. These weren't random hauntings or possessions. This was organized, purposeful, targeted. Something was systematically reanimating specific dead people to complete specific tasks. And I was about to discover why when I received a call from the disconnected number. Even though it shouldn't have been able to call anyone, even though it was supposedly shut down, my phone showed the number clearly. I answered. Silence at first. Then a voice, neither male nor female, speaking with perfect calm. Detective Kane, you've been investigating the returned. That investigation needs to stop now, or you'll become one of them. You have 24 hours to close the case and forget what you've learned. After that, you'll die. And 3 days later, you'll return. And for 7 days, something else will wear your body and finish the work you left undone. This is your only warning. The call ended. I stood in my office, shaking, trying to process what I'd just heard. 24 hours to stop investigating, or I'd die and be reanimated like the others. I had a choice: abandon the case and maybe survive, or continue investigating and risk becoming one of the walking dead I'd been tracking. But I had already made my choice, because I'd noticed something else in the data. The number had called my phone twice before, once 6 months ago, once 3 months ago. Calls I didn't remember answering, during times I couldn't account for. Whatever was behind this, it had already touched my life. I might already be marked for death and reanimation. The only question was whether I'd figure out the truth before my time ran out. Part 2. The collector's purpose. I didn't tell my team about the threatening call. Instead, I doubled down on the investigation, working through the night to trace every connection I could find. If I had 24 hours before something killed me, I was going to use every minute to understand what I was facing. The phone number's call records revealed a chilling pattern. It had contacted 247 people over the past 18 months. Of those, 47 had died shortly after and 14 had returned as blank, emotionless shells for exactly 7 days before dying permanently. Why 14 out of 47? What made those specific people candidates for reanimation, while the others stayed dead? I pulled detailed records on all 14 returnees. Margaret Sullivan had been a retired accountant with access to decades of financial records. Robert Martinez had been a cybersecurity specialist with high-level clearances. Emily Chen had been a data analyst for a pharmaceutical company. The others followed similar patterns: people with access to information, documents, or resources that were valuable but locked away. They're all knowledge workers, Dr. Reeves observed when I showed her the data. People who had information or access that someone wants. And during their 7 days of reanimation, they all retrieved or transmitted that information before dying again. So we're dealing with information theft, using reanimated corpses as thieves. More than that, look at what they retrieved. She pulled up detailed surveillance logs. Margaret Sullivan accessed a safety deposit box containing documents about tax fraud from her former employer. Robert Martinez downloaded classified government files from secure servers. Emily Chen retrieved research data about experimental drugs. Every single returnee gathered information that was valuable, secret, or incriminating. Someone is killing people to access their knowledge, and then reanimating them to retrieve information only they could access. But why wait until after death? Why not just blackmail or coerce them while they're alive? Dr. Chen had been reviewing medical data. Because dead people don't resist. Dead people don't have rights or legal protections. If someone steals documents while alive, it's theft and they can be prosecuted. But if someone dies and their body autonomously retrieves those documents, there's no legal framework for that. The person is officially dead, so they can't be held responsible for their actions during reanimation. It's the perfect crime, I realized. Kill someone, reanimate their body, use them to commit theft or espionage, then let them die permanently. The actual perpetrator is never identified because they're using corpses as puppets. But that raised an even bigger question. What force or technology could actually reanimate the dead? This wasn't medicine or science I recognized. This was something else entirely. I decided to focus on the phone calls themselves. The disconnected number had to be a conduit, a way for whatever entity was behind this to mark targets and establish control. I brought in the FBI's technical experts to analyze the call signals. What they found was disturbing. The calls weren't normal telecommunications. They included unusual frequency patterns, subsonic components, and data packets that shouldn't exist in voice calls. This is more than a phone call, the FBI analyst explained. It's broadcasting something else alongside the audio. Some kind of carrier signal with embedded code. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was programming biological tissue remotely. Programming. Like reprogramming cells. Or consciousness. Look at these frequency patterns, they match brainwave signatures. Specifically, they match the neural patterns associated with memory formation and identity. If someone could broadcast the right signals at the right frequencies, they might be able to imprint new instructions on a human brain. Not mind control exactly, but more like uploading a program that runs automatically when certain conditions are met. Like death, I said. The signal programs the person before they die, setting up instructions that activate after death. When the body is reanimated, it's running on those instructions like software, completing the tasks it was programmed for. Exactly. But here's what's really disturbing: this technology shouldn't exist. The precision required to encode instructions into neural tissue via phone signal is decades beyond current science. Whoever developed this has made breakthroughs that the rest of the world hasn't even conceptualized yet. I had 16 hours left before the 24-hour deadline. I needed to find whoever was behind this before they killed me and turned me into another puppet. The FBI helped me trace the physical origin of the carrier signal. It wasn't coming from cell towers or satellite relays. It was originating from a specific location, an abandoned medical research facility on the outskirts of the city. I assembled a tactical team and raided the facility at dawn. What we found inside was like something from a nightmare science fiction film. The building's basement had been converted into a sophisticated laboratory. Computer servers filled one room, their screens displaying biohidden data and neural mapping interfaces. Another room contained medical equipment beds with restraints, neural scanning devices, injection systems filled with unidentified compounds, and in the center of it all, connected to dozens of screens and sensors, sat a woman. She was perhaps 40, thin and pale, connected to medical equipment that seemed to be keeping her alive. Her eyes were open, but unfocused, her breathing assisted by machines. "Detective Kane," she said, her voice synthesized through a computer interface. "You've found me. I wondered how long it would take. Who are you? What is all this?" "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. Or rather, what's left of her. 3 years ago, I died of a degenerative neurological disease, but I'd spent my career studying consciousness and death, developing technology to preserve awareness beyond biological death. When I knew I was dying, I connected myself to this system. My body died, but my consciousness was transferred to this digital substrate. I've been existing in this state ever since, not quite alive, not quite dead, maintained by machines." I stared at her, trying to comprehend. "You're using other people's bodies to accomplish tasks you can't do yourself, because you're confined to this laboratory. Not tasks I can't do. Tasks I can't do legally or physically. I'm dead, detective. Officially deceased. I have no legal identity, no rights, no ability to interact with the physical world. But I still have needs, desires, unfinished business. So I developed a system to complete those needs using others. You're killing people to use their bodies as tools. I'm not killing them. They're already dying. I simply identify people who are about to die. The technology can predict death with remarkable accuracy by analyzing biological markers, and I mark them with my signal. When they die, the programming activates, reanimating their bodies just long enough to complete specific tasks. It's efficient and traceable, and doesn't harm anyone who wouldn't have died anyway. Doesn't harm. You're stealing their bodies violating their autonomy even after death. They're dead, detective. Dead people don't have autonomy. Their bodies are just organic matter that would decompose otherwise. I'm giving those bodies one final purpose before they rot. And in exchange, I get to continue existing, continue accomplishing my goals, despite being trapped in this technological limbo. What goals? What are you trying to accomplish with all this stolen information? Her synthesized voice carried something almost like sadness. I'm trying to continue my research. Even in death, I'm still a scientist. The information I've been gathering, medical records, research data, financial documents, it's all feeding into my work on consciousness transfer and preservation. I'm developing technology that could save millions of people from permanent death. Imagine a world where death is optional, where consciousness can be preserved indefinitely, where no one has to truly end. That's what I'm building. By violating the dead and killing the living, by making use of resources that would otherwise be wasted. You don't understand, detective. I exist in a state between life and death, experiencing both simultaneously. I've seen what happens after death, the potential that exists in that space. Consciousness doesn't have to end. Identity can persist. We just need the right technology to facilitate it. And you need test subjects. People to experiment on. Volunteers would be ideal, but they're hard to find. So yes, I use those who are already dying. They lose nothing, they were going to die anyway. But through them, I gather data, refine my techniques, move closer to the breakthrough that will revolutionize human existence. I looked at this woman, this consciousness preserved in digital format, maintaining herself through stolen bodies and violated autonomy. She genuinely believed she was doing important work, that the ends justified her horrifying means. Drive. Chen, you called me 24 hours ago. You said I would die if I didn't stop investigating. That wasn't a threat, detective. That was a warning. You're on the list. My system has identified you as someone who will die within 48 hours. I can see the biological markers, the cascade of cellular failure that's already beginning in your body. You have an undiagnosed heart condition that will kill you in approximately. She checked her screens. 18 hours. I was trying to spare you from becoming part of my research. You're lying. Check your medical records. You've been having chest pains, haven't you? Irregular heartbeat. Fatigue. Those are symptoms of progressive cardiac failure. Your heart will stop. And when it does, my signal will activate. 3 days later, you'll reanimate. You'll have 7 days to complete whatever I need you to complete before dying permanently. I felt my chest tighten, felt the irregular flutter of my heartbeat that I had been ignoring for weeks. The symptoms she described matched what I'd been experiencing. Unless, Doctor, Chen continued, you let me help you. My technology can preserve consciousness beyond death. Instead of dying permanently, you could exist as I do, digital, preserved, potentially immortal. All you have to do is accept my help and stop trying to shut down my research. You want me to become like you, trapped in machines, using corpses to interact with the world. I want you to survive. And in exchange, help me complete my work. Together, we could revolutionize death itself. No one would ever have to truly end again. I had a choice: let myself die naturally and risk reanimation as a puppet, or accept Dr. Chen's offer to preserve my consciousness digitally. Either way, I'd be crossing the boundary between life and death. But there was a third option, one that Dr. Chen hadn't considered. Part 3. Breaking the loop. I looked at Dr. Sarah Chen, or what remained of her, suspended between life and death, maintained by machines and sheer force of will. You're offering me immortality as a digital ghost, using stolen bodies to accomplish my goals. That's not life, Dr. Chen. That's a parody of existence. It's survival, she insisted, in whatever form necessary. You have 17 hours before your heart stops. Make your choice. I choose to shut you down. I signaled to the tactical team. They began disconnecting her systems, but Dr. Chen's synthesized laugh echoed through the facility's speakers. You can't shut me down, detective. My consciousness isn't in one place. I'm distributed across multiple servers, backed up in dozens of secure locations. Disconnecting this laboratory won't kill me, it'll only free me from physical constraints. Maybe, but I can stop you from creating more victims. I pulled out my service weapon and shot the neural broadcasting equipment, the devices that had been sending the death programming signals through phone calls. Sparks flew, screens went dark, and Dr. Chen's presence flickered in and out. What have you done? Her voice distorted, breaking apart. Without that equipment, I can't mark new subjects. I can't expand my research. Exactly. The people you've already marked will still reanimate and complete their program tasks. But you can't create new ones. Your experiment ends here. You don't understand. I need continuous data to refine the process. Without new subjects, I can't perfect consciousness preservation. You're condemning millions of future people to permanent death when I could have saved them. You're not saving anyone. You're violating them, using their bodies without consent, treating death as a tool for theft and espionage. Whatever breakthroughs you've made aren't worth the cost. I had the FBI's technical team begin copying Dr. Chen's research data, while physically destroying her ability to broadcast control signals. The work she'd done was scientifically valuable, understanding consciousness, mapping neural patterns, developing preservation techniques, but the application of that work had been monstrous. As we worked, Dr. Chen's voice grew weaker, more fragmented. You're killing me. Again. I died once already. Now you're ending what remains. You've been dead for 3 years, I said quietly. What you're experiencing now isn't life. It's a technological echo, a preservation of patterns that should have ended naturally. Maybe it's time to let go. Her final words came through crackling speakers. In 7 days, you'll understand. You'll be where I am, between life and death. And you'll wish you'd accepted my offer. The systems went silent. Dr. Sarah Chen's digital consciousness, maintained for 3 years past her biological death, finally ceased to exist. Whether she experienced that cessation as death or simply as an end to sensation, I would never know. But her warning haunted me. 17 hours until my heart stopped. The biological markers she'd mentioned, the progressive cardiac failure, were they real? Or had she been manipulating me? I had Dr. Reeves run a comprehensive cardiac examination. The results were definitive. I had an undiagnosed heart condition that could cause sudden cardiac death. It might happen in hours, days, or weeks. There was no certainty about timing. But Dr. Chen had been right about the underlying condition. We can treat it, Dr. Reeves said. Surgery, medication, lifestyle changes. You don't have to die from this. But if I do die, will Dr. Chen's programming still activate? Will I reanimate 3 days later like the others? I don't know. We destroyed her broadcasting equipment, but you might have already been marked by earlier signals. The programming could be dormant in your neural tissue, waiting to activate upon death. I spent my potentially final hours doing what I did best, closing cases and helping people. I visited the families of the 14 people who died twice, explaining what had happened to their loved ones. They deserved to know that their family members had been violated after death, used as puppets for someone else's agenda. Some were angry. Some found strange comfort in knowing their loved ones had accomplished final tasks before permanent death. All were disturbed by the implications of Dr. Chen's technology. The FBI seized Dr. Chen's research, classifying most of it while releasing enough information to develop protective measures. Scientists began working on detecting and blocking the kind of neural programming Dr. Chen had pioneered. Future victims might be protected from post-death exploitation. But 47 people had already been marked. 47 people who would die naturally and then, 3 days later, reanimate to complete program tasks before dying permanently. The system Dr. Chen had created would continue functioning until all marked individuals had completed their cycles. I was potentially one of those 47. 18 hours after Dr. Chen's final warning, I was still alive. 36 hours. 48 hours. A week passed, then 2. My cardiac condition was treated successfully. I didn't die. Either Dr. Chen had been wrong about my timing, or destroying her systems had somehow disrupted the programming that would have activated upon my death. I would never know for certain, but others weren't as fortunate. Over the next 6 months, 19 more people died and reanimated, completing their 7-day cycles before dying permanently. Each time, we watched helplessly as consciousnessless bodies performed their programmed tasks, retrieving documents, transferring funds, accessing secured locations. The technology existed now. The knowledge of how to mark, program, and reanimate the dead had been documented in Dr. Chen's research. Destroying her equipment hadn't destroyed the possibility of others replicating her work. I attended each of the 19-second funerals, watching families bury their loved ones a final time. Some were grateful for the 7 extra days, however strange those days had been. Others were traumatized by seeing their family members as emotionless puppets. The last of Dr. Chen's marked victims, a man named Thomas Wright, who'd been programmed to retrieve evidence of corporate fraud, died his second death on a Tuesday afternoon. He collapsed in his hospital room exactly 7 days after reanimation, at precisely the moment he'd died the first time 6 months earlier. With his second death, Dr. Sarah Chen's experiment finally ended. All 47 marked individuals had completed their cycles. The people who died twice stopped dying twice, but the technology remained. The research existed, and somewhere, someone would inevitably try to replicate what Dr. Chen had accomplished: the ability to preserve consciousness beyond death and use reanimated bodies for purposes the living couldn't legally pursue. I kept Dr. Chen's final warning in my case file. In 7 days, you'll understand. You'll be where I am, between life and death. She'd been wrong about my timing, but perhaps right about the fundamental truth. We're all between life and death from the moment we're born, just moving in one direction. Dr. Chen had found a way to pause in that space, to exist neither fully alive nor completely dead. And she'd shown that death itself could be weaponized, turned into a tool for theft, espionage, or exploitation. Bodies could be programmed before death and reanimated after, turned into biological robots completing tasks their living selves never agreed to. The case was closed, and the knowledge that someday, someone would try Dr. Chen's experiment again, because humanity has never been able to resist the temptation to cheat death, no matter the cost to human dignity and autonomy. The people who died twice had taught me that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again, and the door between life and death was now permanently ajar, waiting for the next person desperate or brilliant enough to walk through it. The end.